Okay, welcome everyone. As we have just opened the waiting room and folks are joining, we would just like to invite everyone to take this time and go ahead and rename yourselves, if you haven't already, to your first and last name and your organizational affiliation so that we can see who all is present today in our webinar. And as folks are doing that, if you have not renamed before, the way that you do that is you go up to the top corner in the 3-dot ellipses. You can click on that box, and in the drop-down box, you'll have the ability to rename yourself. We are going to have the chat feature enabled for today's webinar. Please feel free to use the chat throughout today's session to have comments, dialogue with what you're hearing, dialogue with each other. And we will also have, in the final 20 minutes of our webinar today, the ability to use the chat to ask questions of the panelists. And we're just having a lot of folks join right now, so we'll give just another few moments. And again, to remind folks, please rename yourselves with your organizational affiliation so that we can just appreciate and enjoy communing virtually in this webinar space with our colleagues across the country. Wonderful. And I think, Ken, in just a few more minutes here, or a few more moments, I should say, I think we'll be ready to go. There's still a lot of folks joining us through the virtual ethers coming in right now to our shared room. And so I'll just share one more time that welcome everyone. This is a webinar format with chat enabled. And so we are so excited to have you all today in this format. Please use the chat to ask questions and comments, share information with each other. We'd like that chat to be sort of that space where you can connect with colleagues. We will also be using the chat to ask questions of our panelists in the last 20 minutes of today's session. And I think with that, we have a good critical mass. So I'm going to introduce Ken Keck of US Department of Agriculture Ag Marketing Service to kick it off for the beginning of today's formal presentation. Ken, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Sarah. As Sarah said, I'm Ken Keck with the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Agricultural Marketing Service. I'd like to welcome you all to the last webinar in our 6-month series examining the pandemic impacts on local and regional food systems. We're grateful to all our partners for their participation over the last 6 months on these webinars, as well as the last year in the broader cooperative agreement. I'd particularly like to thank our cooperators at the University of Kentucky, Penn State University, and Colorado State University for their collaboration. The purpose of this project was to assess the response of local and regional foods and understand their resilience in the face of the pandemic. This work would not have been possible without the collaboration of so many agencies and sectors, including the 17 different community of practice coordinating organizations, many on this call today. We're grateful to all of you and the broader local and regional sector for your engagement in the food systems throughout this past year. Today, we're going to hear from 3 local and regional food leaders at USDA. Deputy Undersecretary Mei Wu, Local and Regional Marketing Specialist Juliana Arnett, and Agricultural Marketing Specialist Samantha Shafstall-Dopp. They will set the stage by sharing what USDA is doing to strengthen local and regional supply chains. And then we will all hold a panel moderated by myself. As Sarah mentioned, the last 20 minutes will be open for your questions and your chance to dialogue with USDA. So as you're listening, be thinking of your questions and be sure to submit them into the chat. Our university partners will be gathering those questions, in some cases collating them, and making sure, of course, that they're germane to the topic today. Today, I am really pleased to be introducing a special participant, USDA's Deputy Undersecretary for Marketing and Regulatory Programs, Mei Wu. In January of this year, USDA announced Mei Wu as Deputy Undersecretary for Marketing and Regulatory Programs. Prior to joining USDA, Mei served as Senior Director at the Natural Resources Defense Council, helping to lead that organization's health and food work. While there, she was working to design a holistic approach to NRDC's food-based advocacy to build towards making local and regional food systems healthier, more resilient, sustainable, and equitable. This work has covered strengthening pesticides policy, antibiotics use in raising livestock, environmental impacts of animal feeding operations, support for farm workers, and food waste. Ms. Wu holds a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from Rice University, a master's degree in environmental policy from the University of Cambridge, and a Juris Doctor from Duke University. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Welcome, Deputy Undersecretary Wu.
Thank you, Ken. I'm really happy to be joining you and all of our research partners today for this final webinar on local and regional food systems response to the pandemic. I know it's been a really tough year for the local and regional food sector, as producers have faced all these disruptions to the markets, the loss of entire revenue streams, or just overall struggles to plan for an uncertain future. And so while there have been some pretty great adaptations in the sector, from online markets to contactless delivery, we know that barriers to access still exist, especially for the socially disadvantaged and beginning farmers. So your work and this partnership has been essential to supporting the resilience of local and regional food systems since the beginning of the pandemic. And your dedication is truly amazing, and we know that your professionalism, experience, and your vital relationships with small stakeholder groups around the nation are what makes this work happen and makes a tremendous difference to producers who had to market their foods through different channels over this last year. We're excited to identify ways that we can build a stronger, more resilient food system, and so one that can overcome the kinds of disruptions and vulnerabilities that the pandemic brought into focus. I hope the lessons of this last year can help local and regional food enterprises significantly increase the scope and scale of their markets. Local producers were instrumental in responding to their community's food needs, whether that was keeping farmers markets open or helping distribute local food assistance. And we are currently working hard to implement the American Rescue Plan, and that will expand on the work that you all have built and work to help us create a more diverse and equitable food system in the process. So before we kick off this panel, I wanted to highlight just some of the recent announcement opportunities that we have for funding. The AMS operates a variety of grant programs, and we encourage applications that benefit smaller farms and ranchers, new and beginning farmers and ranchers, socially disadvantaged producers, veteran producers, and underserved communities. So last month, we announced our specialty crop block grants with $169.9 million in funding, which is an unprecedented amount for that block grant. Just a few weeks ago, we announced $92.2 million in grants to develop, coordinate, and expand direct producer-to-consumer marketing, local and regional food markets, and local food enterprises. Like I said, we want to make sure that these grant opportunities really reach and serve the smaller farms and ranchers and ranches, the new and beginning farmers and ranchers, our socially disadvantaged producers, and all of the other groups that need more support. And we also are looking for projects that can help the sector as they were responding to COVID disruptions. So that might be if people had to buy PPE, or if there were infrastructure changes like putting up plexiglass or things like that. Those costs are things that we're all looking at in some of these grants. We're also planning to announce a new meat and poultry processing grant soon, and that'll help provide funding to improve facilities so that they can get a federal grant of inspection, opening access to new markets. We'll also be announcing soon a new dairy business innovation opportunity for those organizations or for organizations to host initiatives to diversify the dairy markets and to encourage the use of regional milk production. And finally, I want to highlight that we are currently have an open comment period on the President's executive order for USDA to address the food system supply chain. So this is an opportunity for us to take lessons that we've learned from the COVID pandemic and to transform our nation's food system from the inside out. We don't want to just rebuild it into how it used to be and the brittle food system that we saw, but really how do we rebuild to something new that can help secure our economic, our national, and our nutritional future. So we want to hear from all of y'all. And how can we best elevate local and regional food systems? How can we address the needs better of socially disadvantaged and small to mid-sized producers? What can we do to support sustainable practices that can help us advance resilience and competitiveness? So we just announced today that we are actually extending the comment period by 30 days. So the deadline is now June 21st to get comments in. And we really do want to hear from everybody about our food supply chain and resilience and things that we can do to make it all better. Because working together to build a healthier, a more equitable, sustainable, and resilient food system is really a top priority for the administration and for those of us in marketing and regulatory programs. And so I hope you'll share these opportunities with your networks, submit comments, and apply to a grant program if it applies to you. So thank you very much for being here. I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much for that, Deputy Undersecretary Wu. That's quite a way to get off on the ground running for the first several days of this administration, just over 100. So Juliana Arnett is Local and Regional Food Systems Senior Marketing Specialist. Some of you may have met Juliana last fall. She'll be serving on the panel today. She previously detailed as the Local and Regional Food Systems Policy Advisor. She's returned now into the position permanently, albeit under a slightly different title than when you may have interacted with her last fall. Juliana has worked across food systems issues. She has experience with urban agriculture policy, farmers markets, and food systems planning, including triple bottom line nutrition standards and institutional procurement. Most recently, she served as USDA Food Nutrition Services Western Regional Office Farm to School Lead, and that was based in San Francisco. There she partnered with state agencies, school districts, producers, and distributors to strengthen and expand farm to school activity. Juliana, welcome.
Thank you, Ken. It's nice to be here. As Ken mentioned, I am the Local and Regional Food Systems Senior Marketing Specialist. For those of you who may not be aware of what that job entails, a key component of my work here is to really lead a local and regional food systems working group at the USDA. So just as many of you are working in your communities across food system sectors, making sure that you're coordinating to really expand this work in your community and to strengthen it, we are doing the same within the USDA. Our interagency working group straddles all of our 29 offices in agencies. It includes representatives from across the USDA. And the work group really has two real purposes. One is to increase that interagency coordination with employees from across all mission areas, and then to increase our knowledge of local and regional food activities within the USDA and also at large. So we use these working group meetings to get updates on USDA programs and identify opportunities where we can align, but we also use these meetings to really hear from communities that are working on the ground in these issues, whether that be urban agriculture, food hubs, farm to school, really trying to make sure that we are keeping communication channels open and that we are staying relevant when it comes to local and regional food systems. So this position is really unique in that I serve as a liaison between the USDA and local and regional food systems organizations and stakeholders. For those looking for who they can chat with at the USDA about local and regional food issues, while we have multiple positions in that realm, I'm an easy first go-to and can help either direct you in the right place or can have conversations with you around relevant local regional foods issues. I'm really here to listen to concerns and to help communicate and identify those solutions throughout the USDA, and also to help you navigate to the right partners. I also can attend events and meetings and really enjoy being out in the field when it's safe to do so, to make sure, again, it's a communication channel that is open between what's really happening on the ground out there and what's happening within the federal government, and making sure that those two activities are really aligning. And so you can contact me. I'll put in the chat box my phone number and my email, but just wanted to say that I'm really excited to be here with you. I know there's been a lot of great work happening in the most difficult of circumstances. And we're really excited about local regional food and making this work, expanding this work throughout the USDA, one that really addresses equity, also making sure that we are really thinking about food in a comprehensive way. And again, making sure that we're opening communication channels as much as possible between us and the federal government, and that we're staying relevant. So just wanted to let you know that I'm here and excited to hear your questions today. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Juliana. We're certainly happy to have that more active local and regional working group across USDA, making sure that our programs and services work for the very stakeholders on this call today. So if we can, let's turn now to focus on our webinar topic for today. We're going to be highlighting the learnings from the last year, and then we are going to see how USDA is responding to those learnings. As you know well, this collaborative project gathered leaders from 17, actually over 17 different communities of practice, ranging from the familiar faces of local food, such as farmers markets and farm to school, the lesser known, I won't say corners, but the lesser known but emerging sectors like specialty grains, the cooperative grocers, and then key governance partners like the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture and, for instance, the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative. The diversity of local and regional markets makes them uniquely challenging to measure and analyze. However, the findings from our efforts show that local and regional food systems have proven their ability to respond and adapt in times of crisis, thanks to diverse value chains and rich collaborative networks. Our team has launched a virtual resource hub, conducted focus groups, convened monthly cross-sector meetings, published case studies and individual sector snapshots, hosted monthly webinars just like this, fostered new cross-sector collaborations, and centered issues of equity and access for stakeholders across local and regional food systems. All of this, of course, has been with the aim of supporting that long-term prosperity and resilience. Today, we want to recap this work briefly and highlight the many outputs of the project. We hope you will gain a perspective from USDA on how these stories and data generated by this project will help inform local regional policy and will help, most importantly, in addressing the next unknown shock to the system. We'll also gain an insight on how this project design compares with other cooperative research that AMS has conducted in recent memory. This project certainly was unprecedented for our team at AMS. To recap how our project was designed and what we've learned, I'd like to introduce Samantha Schafstall-Dopp. Samantha is an agricultural marketing specialist with the Marketing Services Division. I can attest to what a valued team member she is. It's the team that I'm privileged to lead. Samantha has been AMS's lead research and project manager, working with the 3 land-grant universities to direct the activities of this project that we're discussing today. So Samantha, a little drum roll, I'm going to ask you to take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Deputy Undersecretary Wu and Juliana, for joining our panel today, and for all the panelists who have come to participate in this webinar. We're really excited to hear from you. That's kind of what this project has all been about. So I want to first go into kind of how we shaped this project. When the pandemic was coming about, we knew we had to do something. We knew there was a lot to learn, and there was a lot of ways that USDA, specifically AMS, could contribute to the people doing the work on the ground. So we kind of got together as a team, as a USDA team, and brainstormed and worked to develop partnerships with different universities around a project. The 5 main goals and vision being to support, to leverage, to capture, to foster, and to educate. So that would be supporting the local regional food system and the people that are already, adapting in the times, to leverage the diversity of the local regional food system sector and how they innovate and are resilient, to capture both the financial and non-financial impacts of COVID-19 on the local regional food system, to both, help inform individuals who are trying to do the work, and also inform USDA so that we can adapt our programs, our policies, be able to find ways to financially support people doing the work, to also foster cross-sector collaboration. There's so much to learn from different market channels, from different individual stakeholder groups. How do we find a way to bring everyone together, to have that shared learning, to have that new connection and partnership, to build this cohort of individuals, and then to educate individuals about USDA programs that are available, and technical assistance and resources that are there, but also to educate, as I said, USDA about the challenges and the needs facing the local regional food system, and how we can use those to better guide and develop programs and policies and funding opportunities. By the time we had this vision, this idea, and these wonderful university partners, which includes University of Kentucky, Colorado State University, Penn State University, and the Northeast Regional Co-op Center for Rural Development, we realized, rapid to the federal government isn't necessarily rapid to the people that were out there, the farmers that needed to get paid, the markets that needed to sell food, the restaurants that were closing down and needed to find a way to take the food that was in their freezers that they already purchased, and how do we get that to the people who are in need. There was so much work already being done on the ground. So the typical USDA approach of partnering with universities, doing a year-long project, analyzing data, putting a research report out a year later, that wasn't going to work. People were already doing the work. There was so much that we needed to learn before diving into what a deliverable would be, what resources are actually needed. So we kind of flipped the script. We partnered with, as Ken said, originally 17 organizations representing different stakeholder groups and market channels. So farmers markets, CSAs, local fisheries, farm to schools, also the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative, James Beard Foundation, the Committee for Racial Equity in the Food System out of the Center for Environmental Farming Systems, which is NC A&T, NC State University, and North Carolina Department of Agriculture. All these different organizations coming together, and instead of us telling them what they need, why don't we start first by listening? Because these people have already been innovating, already been adapting, already finding ways to work within this new, pandemic system and pandemic response that we found ourselves in. So we kind of pulled this research team together, reached out to these organizational partners that were already had this access to different stakeholders, and started first with listening sessions. The cooperative research agreement that we entered into with the universities had some ideas about what we would create, but it wasn't prescriptive in any way, shape, or form. It was set up to be able to adapt just as the stakeholders were. What you see on the screen is kind of the deliverables we put out, but if I was to really draw what it looked like, you would just see tons of circles on the screen, because it really was this this feedback loop where we were trying to learn, to create, and then to give back to the stakeholders and say, hey, is this what you wanted, or do we need to do something different, or what can we create from there? So starting first with listening sessions, we held listening sessions with each of those stakeholder groups. They put forth, 8 to 10 people. 2 of our research team leads, who were absolutely fantastic, facilitated the listening sessions, gleaned a lot of wonderful information from it, overarching themes, talking about, different challenges that the groups were experiencing, different innovations. Hey, what were some policies that impacted your success or were barriers? What were some policies or programs that were really helpful? What are the resource needs, the technical assistance needs, the funding needs? Where are you seeing things? What about groups that are disproportionately negatively impacted by COVID-19? Who are they and how can we get to them? We found so much wonderful information from these listening sessions that were unfortunately private based on, data collection rules and regulations that we couldn't put into the public forum, but we wanted to find a way, hey, how do we share this with everyone and share our learnings and create from there? So we started with the listening sessions, and then started doing monthly meetings with those 17 organizations who we called communities of practice coordinating organizations, the research team, and then USDA members as well. Really doing this cross-sector learning, sharing, hey, this is what we're experiencing, what about you? How could we help each other? And then gleaning from those listening sessions, what was needed from the communities. So we developed a resource hub. One of the things that came up a lot was either that there were not enough resources or too many, that it was so difficult to sort through them, figure out what is right for me, that there was a need for some type of curated space that was easily searchable, had the ability to say, hey, is this a webinar? Is this a fact sheet? Is this a how-to guide? Really just a quick and easy curated space where people could find really easily the information that we needed. So the first thing we created was a resource hub, and the link to that has been put in the chat a couple times, but I suggest you check that out. Also on that is a list of all our partners and our university partners and the individuals who've been doing the work. If I was to name everyone here right now, I have a 15-minute limit. They'd probably play the music off like I was in an award show and kick me off stage because there's just so many people involved. But please check out that partner page and give credit to the individuals who really did the work. I'm kind of just a voice of AMS right now, but they're the ones that have been really knocking it out of the park. From that resource hub, we also started doing impact assessments. So like I said, the listening sessions were private, but there was so much information there. So how do we find a way to put this into a public forum? The communities of practice, those organizations all wrote impact assessments. We also refer to them as sector snapshots because it was kind of a one point in time, what's your sector experiencing? They took information from the listening sessions. Some organizations had already done their own surveys as well, and put it into this 2-pager that's also up on that resource hub about what that market is experiencing, that market channel or those stakeholder groups are experiencing at that point in time. We're doing one again right now. A lot of them have already been drafted. We're kind of reviewing them and about to publish to our website. So you'll have 2 points in times to compare. Those are really, really interesting as well. The third thing we started putting out were these innovation briefs. So people were talking about these really cool things they were doing, and we wanted to find a way to make it public, that people could learn from them, that they could replicate, because a lot of these things were kind of not no-brainers, because the people doing them are smart, but really easy to do, and just if they just knew about them. So what started out as like 3 to 5 page briefs, some have gotten a little bit longer because people are just really excited to share. But hey, how do you start a UPIC oyster trail? That's a cool idea. Local Catch Network helped to write that one, and that's up on the website. Food hubs were changing their market channels from food hubs to CSAs. That's another one that's out there. How do you switch your food hub to a CSA? There's a really great example about Fresh Approach that's on the website. Those types of discussions about what people were actually doing, what was the challenge, what was the innovation, and what was the outcome, and then how you could actually do it yourself if you wanted to do something like that. The next was this COPCO network survey or social network analysis that's being run by Sarah Rocker, talking about, hey, this is a really cool idea that we pulled together of this cohort of individuals, these organizations. Some have known each other, some haven't known each other. They're interacting in different ways. What's the impact of that? And how can we learn from what we're doing in this project to possibly guide future activities? The next was this webinar series. So this is the last. We've had 7 before. All of the topics from that were also gleaned from the listening sessions. We were seeing a lot of overarching trends and themes come. The CSA Innovation Network was talking about one topic, but then the niche meat people were also talking about the same thing, and so was the James Beard Foundation. And it was just really interesting to us as a research team to see, no, there's no silos in the local regional food system. There's a lot of similar experiences, but often when you do webinars or something, it's kind of like all the farmers market people, are on the panel, or all the agritourism people, or all the co-op grocers. What if we were to put together this series that wasn't just a point and shoot presentation, but a conversation, a facilitated conversation on these trends and these topics that are coming up, and put people from different sectors on the same panel together? How cool would that be? So we started with retaining and engaging new customers. We're seeing a lot of different new customers coming into local regional food systems. Let's talk about that. Informal and formal cooperatives, a lot of new cooperatives are coming up. Let's pull together a couple of sectors and talk about it. One of the last ones we did was on the consumer survey that we put out, so we can talk about that now too. So Colorado State University led the effort to do a consumer survey, a nationally representative survey of 5,000 households, talking about changes in consumer behavior. What's happening, what's going on, what's here to stay, what's the future going to look like, looking at different points in time, specifically like September 2019, April 2020, and September 2020. And what's the impact on rural, what's the impact on urban, what's the impact on smaller communities, et cetera. From there, we started drafting these consumer survey insights. So 3 pages on specific topics. You can really do a deep dive into the data and learn about what they've gleaned from that. One example of which is that 35% of the individuals surveyed tried a new local regional market channel over this last year. 17 of which actually tried multiple. So farmers markets, CSAs, butchers, these new customers are coming to those spaces. Also, as predicted, online. 33% of individuals use online methods for their food shopping back in September of 2019, increased up to 43 in April of 2020, and then is all the way up to 49% in September 2020, showing that online, it's a trend, but it's here to stay. And maybe that's something we should invest in. And so those are all the deliverables that we've done, all of which are up on the website, which here's a little snapshot of it, our consumer survey insights, impact assessments, as I said, partner page, check out the partner page. Those are where the cool kids are across the board, and tells you a little bit more about the project as well. And then just a quick little hint at what 2.0 looks like. As we've heard from our COPCOs and then other people out in the field, the pandemic is not over. We're not in this resiliency phase or recovery phase quite yet. There's still a lot of work and need in this field. So we're going to continue this project on. We've learned a lot from it. We're growing from it. And there's also these topics that we think we really need to focus on in a 2.0. So building on 3 kind of pillars of success: network building, technical assistance and resources, and then research. And diving deep into these kind of action teams that have been developed. These are 4 topics that have been across the board on everything that we have done have come up. So data and metrics, people need data. They want to know how to collect it. They want to know how to use it. Online platforms, as I said, here to stay. A lot of people are diving into it. It's more customers are using it. Community food economies, we're talking about cooperatives. We're talking about coming together as a local regional food system and not a silo. What about we create this pandemic preparedness playbook where we capture the experiences and lessons learned from the practitioner level and find a way to utilize those stories and lessons to build a strategy for the local regional food system in response to future shocks to the system. And then finally, this network of networks. We've learned at USDA so much. I know our university partners have well. We hope our organizations are learning from each other and have gained a lot, especially by having that feedback loop with USDA. Where we're learning from them and they're learning from us. We want to keep that moving. How do we build this local regional food system consortium, whether it's something more formalized or informal, but how do we keep this conversation going? And that's my time. I hope it wasn't too quick. Happy to have more conversations, but it's a time to thank you to all the organizations and university partners who have helped us. There you go, Ken.
Sam, that's incredible. A lot of moving parts there. So, so now it's the time for our panel actually to get going here. And our first question is going to be for our new Deputy Undersecretary, Wu. So pandemic recovery has been front and center for this new administration. That is no secret at this point in the administration. So how do you see local and regional foods connecting with the broader goals of senior leaders at USDA?
Yeah, that's a great question. Local and regional food systems are a key part of the pandemic response. And so from the earliest briefings that we've had with the secretary, he has been committed to making the sector a central focus. And in fact, when he talks about overall, what we want to do is we want to transform this food system, and local and regional food systems is one of the pillars of, one of the 3 or 4 pillars that he's thinking about as really the underpinning for how we're going to make this transformation happen. And like I said, we want to take everything that we've learned through the pandemic and actually rebuild our food system into something that is better, that is stronger, that's more resilient, that can withstand the next crisis. It's not going to be another pandemic, hopefully, but it could be something driven by climate. It could be something else, but just a way for us to become more resilient. And so local and regional is a huge part of that. We can use them to create new market opportunities. He's looking also at value added products, a lot of organic and things like that, niche products. We want to look at how we can strengthen the diverse supply chains, looking at new income sources, better competition, more equitable markets for producers of all sizes and backgrounds. So we're looking, at how can we better support Black, Hispanic, Indigenous, and other farmers of color. Like I said, where does organic production help both with farmers, but help us lead on climate solutions, because that is a big part of what we want to build into this new food system, is one that is sustainable. And if climate is our next crisis, what can we do about that? Or what can we do to try to slow it down? And all of these ways of creating new streams of income as we are trying to lead the world in sustainably produced food. So these are all elements that we need for our resilient food system. We want to have stronger rural economies and want to be able to withstand these perturbations in our system. And so some of the other pieces are, how can USDA put rural America and local and regional food systems at the heart of these solutions? How can we, can these be part of shortening the supply chain so we reduce our carbon footprint in food transportation? And of course, on the other side, he talks a lot about nutrition and security. And so how we know that local access to healthy food has really important impacts on nutrition for our communities and especially for children. And so, innovations from local producers, so delivery of fruits and vegetables to schools and, working with local producers and food banks, all of these are critical components to building back our food system. And it is, it is really an important pillar of what the secretary talks about.
Well, that's tremendous news to hear that in the office of the secretary, these systems are taken seriously. That really is tremendous. Juliana, while you may be new to your particular role, you are not new to community food systems and collaborations. I imagine in your prior role, you became familiar with the coordination challenges involved in an idea as seemingly simple as getting local sourced products from farmers into schools for school children. Sounds simple, right? But can you give us an idea of the day-to-day work you'll anticipate doing in attempting to open the lines of communication and coordination, collaboration right here at the good old USDA, inside the halls, maybe inside the virtual halls for a while? What are some of your thoughts, Juliana?
Sure, good question. So for some of you on the call, when I mentioned that we have a local and regional food systems working group at the USDA, that may have been the first time that you heard that. So kind of what my day-to-day looks like is, I will say I really focus my activities on kind of 4 key components. One is trying to find a common agenda around local and regional food systems across all of our 29 agencies and offices. Also developing mutually reinforcing activities, trying to identify shared measurement systems and continuous communication across all of our agencies and offices. So in many ways, my job looks internally a little bit what the local and regional foods response to COVID externally looks like, just focused here on the USDA to make sure that we're coordinating. So I am new to my position, so as we get up and started, and I should take a step back and say this work isn't actually new at the USDA. It's had many variations over the years, and local and regional foods work, if you really want to get back into it, dates back to the 1970s in the USDA. So I'm building on a long legacy of programs. And as Deputy Undersecretary Wu talked about, a really exciting future. So some of that work here is going to focus on trying to bring our agencies and offices together around strategic planning around local and regional food systems, really being able to clearly articulate our goals, both internally here and externally to partners. Again, also developing those mutually reinforcing activities. I am spending a lot of time with partners, getting to better understand their programs and the resources that they offer, trying to identify where if we make simple shifts or if we align efforts across agencies and offices, we can really maximize our impact on the local and regional food systems. In my previous job at the USDA, I used to work on farm to school. And I spent a lot of time with partners helping them kind of navigate the USDA and think of it as, you know, tell me what your vision and your goal for your programs are. And we can think of the USDA kind of like a pie and how these different programs, resources, and technical assistance can help build towards your goal and your vision for your local and regional food systems. So I'm really hoping to help people see how the pieces fit together here internally for us to develop local and regional food systems, but also for us to support the vision of communities on the ground. And then just like Samantha mentioned, data and metrics is of importance to partners in trying to you know, grapple with what is really happening, what's the data saying is happening in the field. Also, how can we use that data to better improve our delivery and our programs, trying to do that same effort here in the USDA. So we collect data around local and regional food systems in many different ways at the USDA, whether that's the farm to school census at FNS or our local foods marketing survey at NES, really looking at how we bring all of those data sets together to tell the picture of local and regional foods across the USDA. And we're looking at it from a couple different angles, including, you know, how do we better track and tell the story of how the USDA resources are getting out in the community and the impact of those things, but also just what is happening in the local and regional food sector as a whole, both in the community and at the federal level. And then really supporting continuous communication. So we have bi-weekly working groups that meet. We also have subcommittees that we are planning to launch where we're talking across agencies and offices and really looking at how we can better align our programs. And our bi-weekly working groups act as a means for us to communicate with one another, but we also bring in external partners all the time to talk to us as well. And it's a great opportunity to share about programs to a broad range of USDA folks so that we can have a conversation that's not just in one agency, but really across the spectrum when it comes to local and regional foods.
Well, Juliana, that sounds like a full plate of work, but oh so important to these stakeholders on the line today. that USDA coordinates across these agencies. So Samantha, you hinted at this a little bit in your presentation, but I wanted to throw the next question to you. So many different voices were brought to bear on this project and their perspectives. So how do you see, maybe a little further, this project differing from other marketing services division project work that you've been engaged with over the years?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest differences was just the sheer size of it. It was a fantastic opportunity to be able to have so many organizations, so many diverse university partners who have different specialties to be able to learn from them. Even our AMS team, there was so many different individuals involved. And the ability to be flexible, I think very often, and understandably so, the federal government, especially when you're putting, financial resources into a research project, everything needs to be scoped out and put out there. This is what the methodology is going to be. This is what the mechanisms are going to be. This is what the deliverables are going to be, the outputs. Here's my measurable outcomes, all from the beginning. And what we learned from this project, and which I hope we're able to utilize in the future as well, is that being flexible and having the ability to iterate and to adapt to the actual needs of the people you're trying to serve, putting mission first, actually is the better way to go about it if you're really trying to create things that are going to be helpful, of best use to the stakeholders you're trying to serve. So I think sometimes just repositioning your mind so that it's mission driven. What is your mission? What is your desired outcome? And if it is to support these ag businesses, these farmers, ranchers, fishers in the best way possible, and find a way to make them financially viable, and that we're creating a system that's of best support to them, then you have to start with talking to them first. We can't decide what's best for them. We have to learn from them. So I think the way that we structured this research is something that should and will most likely continue, especially within the marketing services division, when we have the kind of more of the flexibility and ability to do that, is that that's really how things should be structured going forward, is that mission driven. And as you said, there's so many voices that were brought in, but it's also important to note that it still wasn't all the voices. We wanted to have a nationally representative sample. So we kind of went to this high level national organizations that were fantastic, wonderful partners, very, very great at what they do. But we also didn't necessarily understand, okay, what are tribal fisheries in Pacific Northwest? What is their distinct experience? What about Black farmers in North Carolina? What about CSAs and New England? I don't know, the regional differences, all of those things. I think that's something that we want to really address in the future. And in this 2.0, when we're talking about that network of networks and building that consortium, is how do we get to the nitty gritty, and how do we really understand kind of the unintended consequences of USDA programs for specific audiences, places where maybe they're disproportionately negatively impacted that we didn't understand because we were taking a national landscape at first. I think that's kind of a future. That's the 2.0, is how do we get to the true understandings, like all the way grass level. And so I hope that's going to change and adapt in the future as well.
Samantha, certainly unique for an agency like USDA, this project. So we're learning as we go. It's awesome. Well, we have a next question for Deputy Undersecretary Wu. As part of the early pandemic response under the previous administration, the USDA adapted a key local and regional food solution in the form of Farmers to Families food boxes, based, as you can imagine, on a kind of a CSA model. How do you see this program adapting to feedback that you've heard through recent listening sessions, and how do you foresee USDA's role in connecting local producers to food insecure Americans?
Yeah, so I'll start out by saying that the Farmers to Families Food Box program was, AMS kind of saw this emergency that we had, and created this, was intended to be a temporary program to address what we were seeing right away. And I think the team did an amazing job with what they were seeing with wasted food and, you know, the huge lines at the food banks and things. But it was, the important thing is to say, you know, after I think it's $1.4 billion most recently that we've put into it, that things are changing, right? We're slowly emerging from this pandemic and from this from the problems that we were seeing in the food system. You know, restaurants are starting to slowly coming back online, and we are seeing large amounts of money going into the food assistance. So SNAP and pandemic EBT and those other programs, I think there's more than $100 billion that are going to be going into and are already going into those programs. People are extending, I think increasing, like, you know, SNAP amounts and things like that. And so a lot more money is going into families' pockets where they can make choices about the foods that they buy, and they can make the decisions. And so in the kind of context of all of this new thing, we saw that, you know, it was time to pivot and move away from the Farmers to Families food box. And so that's why we're ending the program at the end of May. But like you said, we had all these listening sessions. We learned a lot. We heard especially that, like, the first 2 rounds were particularly ones that supported local and regional producers, and a lot better than, say, the later rounds when it was just focused on price. And so we also heard that people loved the fresh produce. And what we learned is that USDA can do procurement of fresh produce, and you know, there are food banks and distributors out there who can help us get that out to families who need it. And then we saw some problems with the distribution, and so all these kind of small kind of last mile groups were popping up. And so there's a lot of things that we learned from the listening sessions, and we want to take those and build them into the existing programs that we have already. How can we make them better? How can we you know, revise them in the way that they do continue to support local and regional food systems, local and regional producers, that they are helping socially disadvantaged producers. How do we do it on a state-by-state basis? Do we do it, how can we, is there a way for us to do it more regionally so that there's more culturally appropriate foods, things like that. So these are all the learnings that we've heard from everybody, and I think a lot of people probably on this call have provided to us, and we are trying to build it into now the next iteration of how we do procurement at USDA of food in a way that is supporting both families in need and also our local and regional food systems. We're also, just kind of along those lines, in one of the appropriations packages, we also had money for a dairy donation program. And so we're also in the process of developing a program where dairy products can also go out and can support the farmers who are producing it, but also to families who need it. So that's what we've got going on.
Great. It sounds like some changes are still in the offing. That's fantastic. Well, for our panel audience today, or our webinar audience today, hopefully we've reached a point in the proceedings here where we get to directly hear from you. That is your chance to ask panelists questions. Dr. Sarah Rocker will be reading these questions aloud. She's with Penn State University. She'll be in the background. But allow me to say, we may not be able to get to all the questions today, depending on the volume, but that's been true of our previous webinars, but we will attempt to, of course, summarize this webinar in our 2-page summaries, capture those questions, both that we got to and that we didn't, and try to be responsive in some way. And also, as I'm sure you'll understand, there may be important questions that you put into the chat today or direct to Sarah or Christina that we and on the panel will just simply not be able to answer, owing to the policy development policy inherent to such a large federal agency as USDA. But we have good faith that our stakeholders here understand perhaps some of our limitations in addressing all of the questions in their entirety. So everybody breathe deeply. Panelists, we've got very knowledgeable folks on the webinar today, and hopefully they've got some questions to get our juices flowing here. So Dr. Rocker, what might you have for us?
Thanks, Ken, and thank you to the audience sending us your questions. The first one, I think, is one that will be exciting to a lot of folks. This is regarding the significant expansion of the LAMP program funding for grant programs such as Local Food Promotion Program, Farmers Market Promotion Program, and the Regional Food Systems Partnership Program. And this question is, given the significant expansion of this grant funding in the next upcoming year, what would AMS sort of point to as really a win? So thinking about these grants being 2 and 3 years out, in 2 and 3 years' time, what would you consider sort of some winning outcomes that you might want to see from grantees and maybe even across the local and regional food systems landscape if grantees and these projects are successful?
So we'll certainly defer to our highest level panelists, but I know Samantha probably has some ideas there, Juliana probably too. So it could be popcorn answers or otherwise.
I'll let Samantha and Juliana start, and I'll fill in any gaps if they pop up.
Oh, yeah. I do want to say first, just a quick shout out to our communities of practice. I've put it up before, but a portion of them have actually signed on to do technical assistance, either office hours or webinars, and we'll be sending more information about this. Maybe if Christine is able, could you put how to sign up for the From the Ground Up newsletter into the chat for people? We'll be announcing those organizations who have signed on to do that, to provide technical assistance to grant applicants with a specific focus on Black, Indigenous, people of color, rural, and other underserved community members that may feel as if accessing AMS resources is a little bit of a reach to them. We want to make sure that they realize it is not a reach. We're here to help. We're here to have conversations. So I think, one big benefit would be to increase the diversity of applicants, to increase the diversity of applicants, and provide access to these, triple the amount of money. Let's get triple the amount of project. Let's have a reach. Let's go into the states that we haven't been into as widely before, into communities that haven't been there before. I think that would be seen as a huge success, is just increasing the distribution of that funding. Another success, and I don't necessarily like the term success. People may always think that means profitability. When I'm thinking success, I'm thinking success to them. Are people getting fed? Are people feeling like the money in their pocket is what they need? Is food insecurity going down? Are communities coming together? Do people, not all farmers want to do direct to consumer marketing. They want to farm. So are those farmers, their mental health, is that going up? Are they feeling comfortable that they have the market channels that they need, that someone's taking care of them? Maybe it's a food hub getting developed in their community, so they can just drop their food off and go back to farming and not have to worry anymore. I think all of those things can be seen as success. So that ERS Food Dollar series you guys can check out, that's pretty cool. If we got more food dollars in the pockets of local regional food systems and their farmers, that's a success. But also, less need for emergency food, more security, all of those things. Success to me.
Just to build on that, and I think also to back up what Samantha's saying is, I definitely think that we are taking a new paradigm to local and regional food systems and food systems. We're really using a diverse lens now. So thinking about not just the economics piece, but also that sustainability, health, and equity, because we know food systems doesn't really happen in a silo. And it's not just at the end about increasing the farmer share of the dollar, although that is a very important aspect of it. But we're also talking about how are we restoring our communities at the same time. Every purchase that you make, as you all know, has an impact. So how do we ensure that that's really positive and restorative and it really builds community? So I think putting that foremost and center, that is our hope, to see really the revitalization, not only of food systems, but also the revitalization of communities across the US is our goal. I also think, just getting into the real specifics, I have a collective impact background. I think the Regional Food Systems Partnership Grant, as Samantha was talking about the network of networks, we're talking about the importance of partnerships. And there has been so many in the local and regional food systems who really reached out across lines and developed partnerships that have really strengthened their ability to serve the community and to get their products out there. That grant, I think, just really crystallizing that concept across the United States in communities. Excited to see that happen. I want to see really strong networks develop across the country. Where whether you're in farmers markets or farm to school or you're an intermediary, that like those individuals all know each other and are connected in a community. I think, for the farmers market promotion grant, a couple things I'm thinking that would be real wins is a couple things that we've heard from farmers markets is just, needing to see more data and data utilization, not just for budgeting within the farmers market setting, but also just for having a greater understanding of what's really happening. So would like to see, better data collection and utilization. And then also, I think really, we've seen that I think it's a pretty small portion of farmers markets that have actual paid staff for managing their farmers markets. And I think really building the capacity of farmers markets to thrive and succeed, not only just as a business, but as a stable community hub as well. We'd really love to see farmers markets strengthened. And, we know that intermediaries are one of the primary ways that people purchase local and regional foods in the United States. So I think seeing the continued development of food hubs, seeing really strong connections, particularly with institutions and restaurants as they come back online, that will be a really exciting part of it. So we hope to see a lot more diversification. And, as Samantha mentioned, diversification, I mean, not just in business practices, but also really seeing a diversification of the partners who are running and operating these programs. And, we really want to see these develop good paying jobs for all people in the US.
Yeah, for the most part, I think I would just underscore what both of them said. Obviously the experts here, but so ways that we can. I want to, if we can see more support of our BIPOC farmers and other socially disadvantaged farmers. I also have this vision, like during the pandemic, we new people were talking to each other. There were new partnerships were created. And it's all of it goes to help make our system more resilient. And so what new and creative partnerships, like ones that we haven't even thought of, cool people that don't usually talk to each other and now are suddenly working together. Those would be super exciting to see. I totally agree with Julianne on the need for data metrics. Everybody wants to see the numbers. They want to see how it's changed, but the stories are so important too. And those are really the things that stick with people. And so I want to just emphasize also that to keep bringing those stories to life, because that's what people are going to hear and really resonates with them. But overall, all of these, I think these are all things that we can look at and point at and say, in 2 years, this is how we've made the system more resilient because we've built all these more connections, and look at all these people that are talking to each other that didn't before.
So we've got another question coming in. This next one actually is a little bit about scale here. So the question here is, how can small scale local growers get involved in this food movement? And specifically, how can small growers partner or work directly with the USDA to revolutionize the food system?
Well, I'll start very high level. I mean, now's the time, so we want to hear these ideas. We are, we've got this supply chain executive order that we're taking comments on. Like, tell us your ideas and let us know what's happening. We want to hear from you. We don't want to just hear from the people that we're used to hearing from, and it is something that we're thinking about. So, a lot of the procurement that we do is on a large scale. So I know that that's really difficult for smaller farmers to work with. So, are there things that we can do to help, bring groups of small farmers together so they can work together, or, other things like that. But I think, we are open to creative ideas that can help support small farmers. But Juliana and Samantha, please.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the supply chain resiliency work that we're doing for sure. And I think what's been brought up through this, last year in this response to COVID-19 is that there is a need for some decentralization of the food system, that too big can also fail. That the small, mid-sized people, we're talking to co-op grocers who their shelves for meat were never bare because they had relationships with the ranchers. They didn't have those issues. They're good. They're set up. We have those connections. We're ready to go. More so than, Kroger or Fred Meyer down the street who didn't have those connections. So we have these big box chains who actually had empty shelves and these smaller places that didn't. So there's something to learn from there. So the small and mid-size, I think people may act like it's not part of or some people may say that, oh, we need the centralized approach. We need big farm, big grocery store. That's not. It showed over this last year, that's not how you build resiliency within the food system, and that's an aspect of the supply chain that needs to be nurtured and funded and provided with resources and technical assistance. The small and mid-sized meat processors, those, we got to support them. That's why we're trying with this new grant program, that there's, more technical assistance and funding that's needed. But those are things that we need to help build that system. That's how you build resiliency, is to have all these little ones working together. And so I'm with you on developing the small scale and the small and mid-sized people.
So here,
sorry, my mute.
Yeah.
I think just to build on that, I'm a very, I would say, practical person. I used to work on the field level. And so I kind of just want to have an offside conversation and say, let's talk, let's figure out what's going on in your community and where you best connect. But I think a lot more of that work needs to be supported, to be honest. So the value chain coordination type of work, making sure that there are folks in your region who really have a good overview of the markets and can help producers figure out where to plug in and which markets might be best for them if that's not already in existence. I think that that's a really important part of it. But I also think, as Deputy Secretary Wu mentioned, I also think, our supply chain, she mentioned we just extended our open comment period. We've also been holding listening sessions. I think, continually to hearing more of kind of what is needed on the ground and what kind of solutions might work for communities, and it may not be the same in all communities. I think, small and medium-sized producers, as Samantha mentioned, there were really drastic differences in what was happening in a large retail chain versus some of these smaller mom and pop shops based on the connections that they had. So how do we continue to support that, I think, is the continued question, and how do we really make that a sustainable practice? So I'm not sure that we have all the answers at this moment, but I think that that's something that we're continually looking at how we support. I think value chain coordination is a really important part of it, and continuing to support that. Also, the network of networks, how do we make sure that not just through, one facilitator or individual, but also making sure that key players in the local and regional food systems also have connections with one another as well to be able to support this. So, but I think we need to continue hearing from people, especially through our supply chain executive order.
Great. So we actually have another question that's maybe on the opposite end of the scale. So we were talking about how to integrate small producers. We have some other questions actually about how to integrate the largest of buyers, in particular, institutional sales, such as to schools, to hospitals, etc. And so really curious if any of you have suggestions on grants or strategies to get institutional buyers into, into the local and regional food system conversation.
I feel like it's a premature question because we are thinking about it, and that is definitely on the table. But so I don't really have a great answer except that, yeah, great question, great idea. And we're, again, I feel like it's going to be my answer to almost every question. We're open to suggestions, and we'd like to hear if y'all have ideas about those too. But it's on the list of things to see if we can figure out.
Yeah, and we do have some resources on the resource hub. Farm to Institution New England has some great resources up about getting into institutional buyers. I feel, I know the Niche Meat Processor Assistant Network did like a really cool webinar on how some of the smaller meat processors have gotten into institutions. So there's things out there, but I agree with Undersecretary Wu that we kind of need a collective effort to help support this instead of, oh, go to this group for this and that group for this, and maybe this person can help you with that. There's a lot to learn here and a lot of ways to support. I know our local food promotion program out of AMS does support this intermediary. So the whole reason behind it is to do this, to do food hubs, CSA, food centers, that kind of work where it's not direct to consumer, there is that intermediary body. It is planning grants and implementation grants. So if it's something that you're thinking about and you're wanting to see, let me do a needs assessment or a feasibility study or try to do some relationship building, like those are activities that can be funded through the planning grant. So there are some programs that we have to help support that work. But in terms of technical assistance and resources, those definitely still need to be fully developed. But there are, shots off here and there that can be helpful. But yeah, a collaborative approach and a big look into that is definitely needed.
So Sam, you were just picking up on some of the meat industry. So I just want to lift up this question here. In order to support small and mid-sized meat processors and farmers, one participant suggests that the Secretary's office will have to take a look at how to loosen the hold on the dominant processors and that packers have on rules and policies. Will the Secretary's office take this issue on?
Yes, great question. So we have in the MRP mission area a senior advisor whose title is Fair and Competitive Markets. I think that's what he is. That is his job. That is what he is thinking about right now, day and night, weekends, is all the different tools that we have to diversify, to deal with the consolidation that we have. It's something that is on the Secretary's mind a lot, which is, we know and we saw during this pandemic exactly what happened with this massive consolidation that we have, right? One packer has a outbreak and everything falls apart. So it is at the top of mind. It is controversial, it is difficult, and we have Andy Green is our person who is thinking about all the different pieces. And so there are things that hopefully we'll be able to announce, like more short-term things, and then there's some big long-term pieces that we have to figure out. The meat processing in more regional areas, like what can we do to help build that up? So there's a lot of there, but it is something that the Secretary wants us to tackle.
Yeah, and Andy Green and also Melissa Bailey, who's on the call, who's leading the supply chain resiliency response for the executive order for USDA. Andy Green's been really involved in that process as well, and we're continually asking for comments, as been mentioned before, and it has been put in the chat box. Meat processing is a huge topic that the team, because I'm helping Melissa as well with going through the comments, we talk about all the time. Like, that is a big part that needs to be part of the USDA response to this executive order. So if you have comments, if you have suggestions, if you have stories or anecdotes, like again, unintended consequences of previous policies or needs in the area, please put it in those comments. I'm coding them. I promise you, I'm listening. We're taking in all the comments, and it would be really great if you could put stuff related to that topic into those comments for sure.
So another question that just came in is one of our participants was referencing the American Rescue Plan and was sort of saying how they would be really encouraged to see local grants and infrastructure investments in that plan for food systems, not just emergency meal support, but maybe more proactively. And the question here is wondering, will USDA AMS be providing any guidance recommendations to the administration on the American Rescue Plan as it relates to bolstering local and regional food systems?
The short answer is yes. We are in the throes of it right now, trying to think of all the parts of implementation, and we've gotten the language, as you all know, in the law is some of it specific to food purchase and procurement and grants for pandemic response, and then the big one, that is how to improve food system resilience. So, as I've talked about a lot, the local and regional food system is a big part of how we see this transformation happening and making it more resilient. And so it is going to be a piece of it. But I hate to sound like a broken record. Like, we want your ideas, so submit them and get them to us, because we are trying to figure that out.
Great. Wow, I'm just amazed at our panel who are just taking all these questions left and right. And to our audience, please keep them coming. These are great. I'm going to uplift another question. And this one actually is really wanting to understand, first acknowledge sort of the obesity, type 2 diabetes prevalence in our country, so diet-related diseases, and wondering what AMS, what kinds of connections maybe are you making, either programmatically or just in your thinking, about how local and regional food systems might play a role in addressing diet-related health issues that are prevalent in our country at this time.
Yeah, it's I think I mentioned the secretary does talk about nutrition insecurity, not just food insecurity, and kind of these health outcomes, and as part of what he's looking at and wants to see us tackle as we're looking at this new food system. And so it is part of it. Is it food as medicine? Is that like how we're going to do this? Or, how do we just keep bolstering getting families fresh produce, or healthier foods, less processed foods. So again, it is part of what we're trying to think of to make the food system not just resilient and not just competitive, but healthy and sustainable, because we need people to have better health outcomes when it comes to the food that they're eating.
This is a really good question, but I will say I'm having I'm struggling a little bit with it, because I think that in my perspective and the work that we do here at AMS, I think the two are so intertwined, I can't even separate it. So really, local and regional food systems, I think, are absolutely key in really providing healthy diets and healthy outcomes. When you talk to farmers, a lot of times farmers will tell you that the health of their soil is really instrumental in the health of food. And so when I think about what really creates a healthy society, really thinking back to, well, it starts with a healthy soil, and how do we do that? So we really, practice sustainable practices, really regenerative practices. So I feel like this work is really critical to local and regional food systems. And so I think some of the work here at AMS is helping just better articulate that. And that, you know, like in a very practical standpoint, as we support, you know, farm to school or the development, you know, at farm to school at FNS, or the development of local and regional food systems more broadly here at AMS and farmers markets, local food shops. These are the things that get people excited about eating healthy in a very practical way. You know, when you bring a producer into a school, or you tell them the story behind the food that they're eating, that's the thing that gets them to want to try it. And, you know, garden education, which often I think sometimes is really overlooked, like, you know, but really the data behind that says that kids that participate in gardening are more likely to eat healthy as a lifelong habit. And I think, you know, all of our work is healthy food promotion work. And so just helping people understand that, but at the same time, you know, because this work is really exciting and has multiple different impacts, whether it be sustainability or health, I think sometimes those are very true components of it. But when you're in the moment, when you're producing that food or you're shopping at the farmer's market, it's something that actually might be a little bit more in the back of your mind, simply because this work has just got a lot of energy and excitement around it. So you're doing all of these wonderful things at the same time. And so I think the more that we can engage people in the food production process, and also in really promoting these systems and understanding where the food comes from, I think that we'll continue to see improvements in people's diets.
So Sarah, we may have time for one more question before we ask the Deputy Undersecretary to provide us a few closing thoughts. So Sarah, maybe one more question.
Great. I think we will end with this one here. The question actually is a bit about what the USDA and the project intends to do with the data. So will the examples shared through this project be included in the USDA compendium for the UN Food Systems Summit coming up in July? This would be a moment to say anything that you all want to the audience too about what that summit is as well.
That's all you, Juliana. You're muted. There you
Thank
go.
you. Sorry.
Yep.
So we are in discussions with Elise Golan, who is leading, she's the Director of Sustainability for the USDA, and who is leading the USDA's involvement in the UN Food Systems Summit. We know that local and regional food systems will be a part of that conversation. We are just now starting to talk in dialogue about how to bring those conversations together. So I think it's a very good and very timely question. I think we'll have more to say on that, you know, in the month ahead. But for now, I will tell you that a lot of the partners who have been participating in the UN Food Systems Dialogue, there's another one this week that's going to focus on opportunities. Also, we can put a link in the chat box. There is a way that you can still participate in those dialogues, either as self-guided dialogues, and you can submit comments to the USDA. I know that we had over, I want to say over 1,000 different comments and recommendations for how we can support a more sustainable food system. Continue to please submit those and let us know your thoughts. But we will we are in conversation and plan to continue that conversation over the next couple of months on how to support those local and regional, how to make sure local and regional food systems is a key component of that as we work on transforming the food system. And many of the players who've been at the table or submitted comments are the same that are likely on this call today and who have been involved with the COPCOs. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything else to that.
Okay, well, hearing none. So I just want to be sure to assure the audience that we know there was a lot of good questions. We will be endeavoring to summarize those and to get responsive material back to you. And as Deputy Undersecretary Wu indicated, a lot going on in policy development as we speak, involving the highest reaches of the government, impacting local and regional. So stay tuned also. So Ms. Wu, I wondered if you might have a few closing thoughts for our audience, and then I'll put the final wrap on it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just want to thank everybody for taking the time today to join us and participate in this conversation that we're having about local and regional food systems and our response to the pandemic. This dialogue and the chats that I'm seeing on the side are all really important parts of making sure that we are doing what we want to do and need to do to help rebuild our food system. And so I want to continue to encourage y'all to reach out to us and talk to us about the different ideas that you have. Again, I'll say it one last time, please send us comments and send us your thoughts to all the different work that we're thinking about, and also share all the grant opportunities that we've talked about, these resources. And, we have a great team here that can provide assistance where it's needed if, the grants are confusing or how to navigate this. We have really excited staff who like helping people. And so please take advantage of them. And I also want to thank all of our project partners for all the research that y'all have done and the data analysis and technical assistance and everything. And everybody has demonstrated some, amazing resilience and vitality for our important supply chains. And I'm really excited to see more of the innovations that we'll have and adaptations in this sector, and figuring out what we're going to do to make this new, better, transformed food system. So thank you so much.
Well, that's exciting, and your energy is palpable there, as the folks on this call I'm sure can appreciate. So in conclusion, definitely the panel, you have done a tremendous work here in your answers, your responses to our audience. So I'd like to thank Deputy Undersecretary and Samantha and Juliana, our partners, of course, several behind the scenes today, but really just the engine driving everything, including the land grant researchers, the 17 plus community of practice organizing or organizations, tremendous work, and we all are doing this together. So we look forward to more work with these same players and others, as Samantha said, including more voices all the time, with a possible next iteration of this project. The pandemic is not over. We realize that, and the things that need to be built and built back better are in need. This project adopted the moniker months ago of building better beyond, but how no matter what tagline we use, we look forward to the work, the necessary work, and we can't do it without everybody on this webinar today. So thank you very much. Thank you all, and we'll be concluding the meeting.